Nā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Ena mana, ena rea, a ra rakatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to colleagues, visitors, members of the Dunedin community and members of Merata's whānau and supporters here for this, her inaugural professorial lecture. My name is Richard Blakey. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Research and Enterprise, and it's my great privilege to be here convening this activity for us tonight. So special welcome to whānau, Amakura here from Auckland, welcome. We welcome people from the other place, so thank you. And we, Paul, Pierre and Frida, and I believe that we might have a former Vice-Chancellor, Sir David and Kieran, so welcome to you both. It is our pleasure to be here to host those that wish to support and celebrate this wonderful occasion with Merata and her family. I'm going to just give you an introduction to proceedings, then hand over to Associate Professor Janet Stevenson, who will introduce Merata's IPL. Professor Tony Ballantyne will give a vote of thanks, and then we'll welcome you all, to the Staff Club for refreshments afterwards. But I want to take this opportunity to put this occasion in context of what is an inaugural professorial lecture and what does it mean for us at the university. For us here in the academic executive and other academic leaders, actually, to be perfectly honest, this is academic spa time for us. We get a chance to disengage from all of the things that we are busy with, administration and other very productive activities, and actually step back and remind ourselves what it is to be a professor at the university by listening to one of our newest professors profess about their research or their scholarship. So it is a celebration of all that it means to become a professor at the University of Otago. And so we can look back to our foundations and our four founding professors, Scott, Shand, Black and Sale. And from that time we've set high standards for who has the right to this particular academic title, whether appointed from afar or grown from within. It is characteristics that in our promotion vernacular we use terms such as sustained outstanding leadership and competence or sustained excellence in leadership in at least two of the three core academic areas of teaching, research and service. And that performance has to be at the highest possible level in two of the three. It has to be only excellent in the third of those three, or even sustained and outstanding in order for a promotion to go through. So one can't compromise excellence in any of those areas of teaching, research or service in order to gain this highest of status in the university. And then when these standards are met, we do like to celebrate by putting on an occasion like this. So, as I said, my duty here tonight is to be MC and allow the event to happen, so I won't take too much of your time. But usually it's also an opportunity to talk at a high level about what kind of attributes the inaugural professorial lecturer has brought through to enable them to achieve that promotion or appointment. And it's qualities of excellence, leadership and service that have to be distinguished, and usually we call upon international academic referees to give an unbiased viewpoint, and often I'll summarise some of the narrative that might have come through those kind of reports. But here I plan to depart from the script, not because we don't have such glowing references. In your case, Merata, I can assure you that we do, and from people of great mana, but because I have had the pleasure and privilege to work with you directly and could give my own testimonial about the kinds of attributes that you have brought that have meant that this is the right promotion for you. So for reference and information, much of Merata's time here at the University of Otago has been through a joint appointment with the University of Auckland. Yes, we do love and work well with our friends from the north. And that was because she has had a very important national role as the director of the James Henare Māori Research Centre, which particularly because it has a focus on te takaro issues, was quite right to be hosted at the University of Auckland. But we had the great privilege to have part of your time during that period here. And because of that, your Merata's functional reporting here at Otago was through to me as the DVC for Research and Enterprise. So it was great. I actually had one academic staff member to go through regular review with, and it was always very, very pleasurable to talk to you, I say as a physicist and not as an Indigenous anthropologist, to talk to you and understand what your aspirations were in terms of your plans, academic and professional development for the year ahead, but also to gain an understanding of how the work that you were doing, both here and up in the north, was designed to make a real impact on the people and the communities that you were working with. I had the great privilege then through that to get to know and work alongside Jim Peters, who was your mentor up in Auckland. And a very special occasion was for me to go up with you to Waitangi for a hui that I remember very clearly to this day. Then, since taking on the wise decision to cut your commuting and commit to Otago, Merata has then had a change in that functional reporting line through into the Division of Humanities, and specifically through the Centre of Sustainability, which is why Janet Stevenson will be doing the formal introduction. Now, I've given some indication of areas that, through an academic service, leadership and excellence, have meant that I think your promotion is very, very warranted. But I'd like to also talk about some of the other qualities. Actually, in looking at your CV, some of the other academic qualities are expressed not so much in some of the formal things that we identify, monographs, edited volumes, journal articles, international journal articles, but I noted in Merata's CV there is a category we call creative works (refereed), in which there are 25 items listed. These items are items that are of great significance, of providing reports for bodies such as the Waitangi Tribunal, multiple times, the High Court of New Zealand, UNESCO, Crown Forestry, Te Puna Kōkiri, and other agencies through which your advice is sought and your scholarship is sought to provide important support for matters of concern to you, your iwi, the hapu, and the communities through which your research and scholarship is there to serve. And I guess I haven't seen that service directly except through articulation in your CV, but what I have seen directly is that as a member of communities of interest here in Dunedin, actually the fact that your kids and my kids go to similar schools and we see you around, I can see that you have the same levels of commitment, leadership and service to family and our local communities that extend far beyond that academic service, that to me make it very, very clear and abundant that this is a most deserved promotion, and I'm very, very privileged to be able to give this brief introduction to you now. So with that, it's now my pleasure to hand over to Associate Professor Stevenson to formally introduce you and the topic of your lecture tonight. Thank you very much.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'll just start by acknowledging the mana whenua of Ngā Pui, the rohi within which we are sitting tonight. The rangatira gathered here today from the university and more widely. And I'd like to extend a special welcome to Merata's whānau and acknowledge her iwi, Ngā Puhi and Ngāti Whātua. And also a warm welcome to all of you who are gathered here today. So, as Director of Centre for Sustainability, I'm privileged to have the role of introducing Merata at this very special occasion. Merata is a research professor at the Centre for Sustainability and has an adjunct role at Te Tumu. I'm particularly pleased to be able to share with you a little of Merata's contributions to date because, as those of you who will know her well will agree, she epitomises a particular whakatauki. Kaori te kumara e kōrero mō tōna ake reka. The kumara does not talk about its sweetness. So I'll tell you a little about her sweetness. Merata graduated from the University of Auckland with a BA in Social Anthropology and Māori Studies and a postgraduate diploma in business. She then won a Rhodes Scholarship, which took her to Oxford University, where she completed a DPhil in Social Anthropology in 1998. Since then, she's made an extraordinary contribution, both as an academic and through her major service at every level, to her own iwi, to Māori generally, to New Zealand at a national level and globally. Merata's core focus has always been on Māori and Indigenous cultural and economic development. Within Aotearoa, she has worked with dozens of hapu and iwi claimants on their treaty claims, researching and writing in particular on customary histories and te tiriti. This work has been foundational to the Waitangi Tribunal reports, with her report on Northern Māori perspectives on te tiriti in the 19th century being described as a benchmark by tribunal member, the late Emeritus Professor Ranginui Walker. Nationally, Merata has served as a member on the New Zealand Historic Places Trust Board and the Māori Heritage Council, the New Zealand Roads Committee, and continues to serve as a member of the New Zealand Geographic Board. I think she was involved in Wanganui Whanganui, amongst other things. Well done. She has also served on many other government and community and iwi committees, and she was awarded the Member of New Zealand Order of Merit for services to Māori education in 2012. Internationally, she has worked as a consultant to the United Nations and to UNESCO. On secondment to the World Heritage Centre in Paris in 2008, she helped shape policy internationally on Indigenous issues in World Heritage. Alongside all of this activity, somehow she has also been a stellar teacher and researcher. At Auckland University, where, as Richard mentioned, she was director of the James Henare Māori Research Centre for 9 years, and more recently at Otago, Merata has always had a strong commitment to teaching, not only with undergraduates, but also notably nurturing many postgraduate Māori students, some of whom are here today. Her research on aspects of Māori development and entrepreneurship has received funding over many years from the Marsden Fund, Forced, directly from iwi and hapu, and also the National Science Challenge, Our Land and Water. And in that project, for example, which is still current, she heads a major Māori researcher-led program involving multiple Māori communities, investigating community innovations in land use and economic development. And just last week, she learnt of the success of her new Marsden project, which will explore how connected Māori youth are with their ancestral marae, a remarkable achievement. Merata's many books and academic papers offer new insights on topics of critical importance to Māori and New Zealanders generally. Kaitiakitanga, connectedness to land, connectedness to marae, and Māori values, leadership and entrepreneurship. Weaving these themes together, Merata's talk tonight is about how her Ngāti Whātua hapu at Ōrākei in Auckland have made the strange familiar. How they've made opportunity out of challenge and a story of innovation and the leadership resources that have seen this hapu consider a fledgling business proposal to regain central business district land. It was a completely new world for them that they were entering into. And yet they made the strange familiar, resulting in new prosperity for the hapu and for many others besides. This is the story that Merata will tell for us tonight. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
I'm going to check, is this on? Is this working? Okay, tēnā koe Janet. Just figuring myself out for a moment. Tēnā rā koutou. Tuatahi tēnei takamihi, kia koe te rangatira, e te Vice-Chancellor, te toa wahine. Kia koe anō hoki. Ooh, do I need to do something else? Am I right? Can you hear me? Tēnā koe. Anō hoki kia koe, e te rangatira anō. Kōrua ko koe, Professor Ballantyne, tēnā rā koe. Koutou, koe tai mai nei, ngā ahorangi, ngā pūkenga, te whānau ia te whare wānanga nei. a tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou. He mihi anō tēnei no te pōnanga o Ngāti Whātua o ngā puhi. Kia koutou te haukainge kaitahu. Kaitahu pukitaraki, kaitahu ki o tākou. He honore māku ki te tuko tēnei kauwhau I raro I te maru I o koutou nei maunga whakahi. Nō reira, he mihi, he mihi, he mihi. Koutou te hunga nei, kua taimai nei, tautoko huki ahau. E te whānau o C-Safe. E aku hoa. Professor Sir David Skegg, kōrua kōtoa hoa wahine, tēnā kōrua. Tōku whānau, Pierre, Frida, Paul, kia koe hoki, taku taini amokura, Associate Professor Kawharu. Of Auckland. Auckland, it's okay. Koutou te hāpuri nei, a tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia ora mai tātou. Actually, well, just before I get into this, I would like to just acknowledge those who have also won a Marsden. I do know a little bit about Marsdens, I suppose, and how much hard work is required. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for that. Actually, I just want to acknowledge all those who have put in a Marsden, and perhaps the Marsden gods didn't quite look so favourably this year, but, you know, a bit of tenaciousness, and we've talked about this, persistence. I know you'll get there, so stick it out, stick it out. All right, well, the other thought I had just before I get into my talk tonight, I was looking at the title of what I came up with, what we came up with over a beer or two, making the strange familiar. And you know, these IPLs, on the one hand, they're kind of familiar, aren't they, when you're on that side. When you're on this side, they aren't familiar whatsoever. So for me, I think, you know, maybe for all of us, day to day, perhaps we see or we encounter the strange or the unusual, the unfamiliar. And so you've got to try and make sense of it in some way. You've got to try and make it familiar. And maybe you do that. How do you do that? You have a reference set of values, maybe, or a worldview to try and make sense of these things, these strange things. So, you know, for me, this IPL, it is completely unfamiliar. So I started off with just a little mihi, just a little one, and then I'll have a little kōrero. Then I think I'm going to maybe finish off with a waiata. Hey, Piri. So it's my funny way of making this strange situation of an IPL familiar. And I suppose the other thought I had about these IPLs is that, you know, how often do you actually give a talk that's in a robe? A red one, quite red. It's also not very often, and it's not particularly familiar. But I just wanted to mention that. It's a funny thought. I didn't really think of this at all, but when I was just coming in the door about 20 minutes ago, and I thought, oh my goodness, you know, this robe actually is familiar. It's this kind of a strange familiarity. I've known it for many, many years when I was little. Obviously, I hadn't even started university. It's maybe about 60 years old. And yeah, it's a little long. I think I have to grow into it somewhat. But it belonged to my father. So it's familiar from that point of view as well. So it's just how my mind is working, trying to make the strange familiar all the time. All right. So I've been told I have around 45 minutes or so to speak. So I do have a little kōrero then that I want to share with you. Well, again, Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ballantyne, koutou katoa, thank you all for taking the time out to come at this time of year. I just don't know how you guys have the energy to do these things. You do it so often with all the things that you do, so thank you. Because I know people are quite busy at this time of year with conferences. And actually there's quite a few of our colleagues that are at the Ngāpai conference in Auckland at the moment. So thank you for making the time to come right now. I actually thought that I might get away with doing a Richard Blakey also. and do a Māori time IPL 10 or so years down the track, because it is November and it's almost out the back door of 2018. But not so, and here I am. And here I am also, following on from my whanaunga, Professor Michelle Thompson-Fawcett, tēnā koe hoa, who just 2 weeks ago spoke about the challenges that we as academics and as an institution face in terms of broadening and supporting Māori academic scholarship across all disciplines and across all levels. And I think in relation to that, a second related matter is the understanding within the university of rangatiratanga within university policies and strategies, and facilitating the integration of mātauranga into courses and into teaching as it contributes to addressing problems facing our world. We have some good challenges, and I really did like the whittle that you presented a couple of weeks ago. But I see them also as opportunities ahead of us. For instance, to lead as an institution of Māori research excellence, Otago. To lead as an institution that integrates Māori teaching practices into learning. To lead as an institution that values its treaty-based partnership with kaitahu, the haukainga, and other kinds of relationships that aren't necessarily treaty-based, but are the kinds of relationships with other iwi and hapu. And to be an institution that can provide the best nurturing ground for the next generation of Māori scholarship. Imagine that. I do have those are just some preliminary ideas that I have before I get into my talk. And I have another frame, I suppose, of reference for what I will get into in a moment. As citizens of Aotearoa, we're often told of the poor performance and the underperformance of Māori in all major areas of socioeconomic life. Just go online, go onto the newspapers, and you'll see. The pictures and the statistics are sobering, and they are worrisome, especially for me, as I think of my whanaunga who live without electricity from the main grid up north in the Bay of Islands. The others who are on the inside. The others again who are on their cars, which are their homes. And the many aunts and uncles and cousins whose mortalities have been the outcome of diabetes. There's heaps of them. And mental illness as well. I could go on. But what I want to say is that for much of my academic and active research career, I have been driven by a deeply ingrained desire or interest to find the positives. The solutions, the models, the innovations, and the leadership practices, and the like that have enabled communities to prosper. And so on these topics, I, together with Paul, have spent much of my time with our communities to find out what the aspirations are, working with them and helping them to see those aspirations become real. Now, it's a kind of, as we would often say in social sciences, a research and service, recognising that solutions don't actually necessarily come from the off-site labs or even from the halls of the university, but rather, or actually, and in many cases, they come from the people themselves. And they must. All of this, of course, has meant that I've had to become trained in the scholarship of drinking marae cups of tea and in pork bones and puha research. But that's just quite fine for me. Fortunately for me, there are Māori scholars and leaders before me, stretching over many generations, and which for me provide much inspiration for my talk tonight and for my research in terms of how all have navigated or have shaped new pathways for improving the social, economic, environmental worlds of their people. Te Opirana Ngata of Ngāti Porou, we know, instigated several initiatives to revive te ao Māori concerning our language, tikanga and mātauranga, museums and marae, along with Māori land initiatives, many, many things that he did. And then I turn to this kuia here from the far north, Mere Mere Penfold. She was a champion of te reo Māori, and among her many achievements, she translated a Shakespeare play into Māori. And before that, she helped my father Hugh in his work on interpreting the Māori text of Te Tiriti, so that we could compare that with the official English text. Ngā Pari Hopa is another who I look to. Is not the first, but I believe the second Māori woman to have graduated or gone to Oxford and studied social anthropology. The first being Makareti Papakura of Te Arawa, I think from the 1930s or so. It's amazing, a Māori woman in Oxford in the 1930s. And she did a special branch of anthropology called museum ethnography, if that's correct. And I just have to point this out, that I think there's only ever been one other that's graduated from Oxford in this particular discipline, museum ethnography, and he's sitting in the front row right here. Also from Te Arawa. It's okay. Ngā Pari Hopa anyway. And I also turn to Sir Mason Jury, who needs little introduction here as an alumnus of this university. But suffice to say that he has actually known me longer than I knew who he was, because I ran around his marae as a 2-year-old. We lived in Palmerston North. My dad is an academic there. Or when I climbed high up a branchless palm tree in his backyard to prove to his son, now head of Māori Studies at Massey, that I could. So there's a score to settle between this university and that university. There are many others that I could mention, but there's a couple here I just briefly will. Ranginui Walker was a key mentor of mine at Māori Studies at Auckland University. He thrust me into a role of tutoring his big stage 1 paper. I think I had about 7 tutorial classes. I was actually just not long out of high school. And there are others. There's Margaret Mutidi, feisty lady from the north, different tribe. And there are many others. Sir James Henare there. The one in the middle is Huhana Bubbles Mihinui from Te Arawa, a foremost guide of the Whakarewerewa village and an incredible weaver. And of course, Patu Hohepa, Te Kura o Te Marama Waka, and the many who work tirelessly for our marae to keep the heart of our communities alive. So in a way, I feel I am just really a small part of a whakapapa of Māori intellectualism and service, though. More importantly for me, service. And tonight, it is to these people that I acknowledge and would like to pay homage to. I also think of tonight not as an IPL for a Māori research professor who has been an academic here for the last 8 or so years, maybe 9 or so. Or as an academic who has had a split identity, straddling 2 universities, the other one and this one, for much of that time. Instead, I think of tonight as an opportunity to share something from my kete of research. So I'm going to tell a story. The kōrero story I want to share with you is essentially about how innovation within the complex and challenging circumstances of Te Ao Māori is having an immense impact on a community. Well, a whole city. That is New Zealand's largest city of Auckland. And the innovation will continue to have great significance for generations to come. The story is effectively about a hapu, I think of around 4,000, thereabouts, who, despite having been completely landless by 1951, except for just a 1/4 acre, have come to be one of the most wealthy Māori kin communities per capita in our nation. This quarter acre was a cemetery, right there. 1951. But I like to deviate a little, I'm sorry, but I've got one last deviation. I have a few further preliminaries to make, including some words of gratitude. And you won't know this, but I just have to say it. In particular, I would like to acknowledge Sir David Skegg, who has known me now since I was about half my age. Back when we first met, I had the fortune of being opposite Professor Skegg and a committee, and we were discussing and debating and having dialogue on big issues of the world and of New Zealand. I was trying to sound all-knowing and knowledgeable, I was 22, but I was in a room of professors, a QC, a lawyer, and other equally impressive leaders who actually were knowledgeable. However, I must have said something right because I was very grateful to have been given a nod by Professor Skegg and his committee to take up a scholarship that was being offered to study in England. I was very excited as I had no expectations whatsoever about the scholarship, and at the time I remember being quite chuffed to get a free plane trip from Auckland to Wellington. And actually the other big one was for me, and I still remember it exceptionally clearly, is to go beyond those big gates down in Wellington near the Basin Reserve, is it? And see what's on the other side. It was all quite a buzz. So after the committee hearing, off I went back to Auckland, and a few months later I packed my bags and landed in the UK. I remember arriving at my university, my new university, and thinking, I'm here, and now what? There was a completely new lingo to learn, digs and dons, DPhils, not PhDs, matriculation going down, kit instead of sports gear, and all sorts of other things. And my favourite was, what are you reading? You would know this, Michelle. Which was not a question about a book that I might have actually been reading. It was instead a question about, what are you studying and what's your discipline? Suddenly, I felt that the familiar but strange feeling was taking hold, and I also realised I was around 12,000 miles away from home. Fortunately, though, I had a rescue team of 2 other young budding Māori who arrived a few days before me, and some notes of welcome on my letter pigeon box at college. On day 2, care of my new whānau, they took me on a cultural orientation tour so I could settle in. And I could say, okay, this is home. And actually it is like home. I made this strange familiar, and I realised I was actually already in a hapu. And they have whare tūpuna. Here's the hapu, quickly moving on. And they have marae, a whare kai, they're beautiful whare karakia. And of course there was a very deep whakapapa stretching back many hundreds of years to tūpuna who had made my college what it is today. So I thought I was actually very, very lucky. Strangely, everything was familiar and everything was ready-made for me, or so I like to think. Now, it might seem a bit odd for someone to be thinking Māori worldviews or philosophy regarding an ancient, venerated English education system, but I would like to acknowledge and remember these too. For the values that they have instilled in me from an early age, in essence, they said to me, anything is possible with hard work and passion. What may appear as challenges are only opportunities. And while the present or the future may seem uncertain or even strange, you already have a toolkit of Te Ao Māori that will provide a frame. And from that frame, you can see the world, and it will also keep you focused on what is important to you. You'll also be surrounded by familiarity, so just embrace it. In a way, these basic ideas of making the strange familiar, of making opportunity out of challenge, has been the very essence of my iwi of Ngāti Whātua, whose resilience in the face of significant hardships, poverty and complete land loss has enabled them to grow and to prosper. So let me introduce Ngāti Whātua to you again, following on from Michelle, and get back to the story. So right now I have about a 2 to 3 minute film clip to just show you. This is a little kōrero that I had with one of my kaumātua tipuna, Danny Tumahai, who talks about significant loss of the marae and the burning down of the meeting house when he was a little boy down in Okahu Bay. He witnessed all of this. The point about this is that this period in Ngāti Whātua's recent history has seeded the internal fires, the significant internal fires within those who later came to do everything that they could to regain as much title of ancestral land in Auckland as possible. So, hopefully I'm going to get this right.
I was a young man when we were evicted from the Papakainga up onto the hill here. That kind of what happened in those days took away from me the memory of holding on, because if you hold on to stories and you want to recognise it, then it's good to pass them on to others. And unfortunately, when we were moved, we had no marae. That was taken from us, and that's what I believe killed a lot of our old people. But we grew up, and my own children, had generations of having no marae upbringing. There was nothing that we could do. The closest that we could do was when tangis took place in the Kaipara, in Rewati, in Aranui, then we had a little bit of the marae part of it. Because when tangis were held here, when we were evicted, they were held under tarpaulins on our front lawns. We didn't have this place that I'm speaking with you today. The thing that stands out for me on that particular thing is the whaling. Is the whaling that took off. And one thing, and I'm still I couldn't understand, is that when things were burning, especially the meeting house.
Do you remember that?
I remember it.
Do you remember how it was burnt?
I don't know, it was on fire when I saw it. But I remember the whaling that was going on. The thing I distinctly remember, though, was the smoke coming from the Te Purua Tamaki. It didn't, expect smoke to go straight up in the air. It floated flat across the waterfront, and the smoke seemed to settle on the water. I just couldn't understand it.
Eerie.
It just floated across the waterfront and settled on the water and went out that way. I don't know. I couldn't understand. Maybe there was some wind or something that was blowing that day, but it just didn't seem. But you get that kind of combination. You get the combination of the whaling that was going on, and that can really affect a person when the people that you love are so hurt. It took a lot to make my people cry over there, but and waiting together was something that I can never ever forget. It just keeps in my memory. Before it happened, a lot of.
So, Koro Danny's just giving you a little bit of a snapshot into the ultimate low point in our recent history. But Ngāti Whātua has come a very, very long way in a very short time. So, let me see if I can get this right up. So what happened there at that time is some people that are still alive today, as I said, it seeded the internal fires within the leaders today to do something about regaining as much title of ancestral land as they can. So let's have a look then at the story. Some years ago in the 90s, there was a period of great change. The Ōrākei Treaty claim had recently been settled, $3 million in cash and housing stock along Kupe Street in Auckland, just behind the marae, had been returned as part of that settlement, and a fire actually had also occurred in this wharenui, scorching carvings and other parts of the house. So there were major things happening. It was difficult to imagine anything else on any large or transformative scale happening, especially also against a history of significant loss. But exactly this was emerging. A fledgling business proposal to regain central business district land was being considered. The idea seemed audacious at the time. Foreign and local corporate giants and other hopefuls were eager to capitalise on the opportunity as well, and there was much positioning and much posturing. Yet Ōrākei was just a little hapu. It was a completely new world for them to be entering into. It was notable also that given that we were talking about a chunk of central city land that was at the time a derelict residue of forgotten days, when Aucklanders travelled to the city via rail, but all that was left were disused railway tracks, a formerly majestic Grand Central station, and plenty of weeds, broken glass and graffiti-covered platforms. So I simply wanted to know more about this land proposal. Was it a pipe dream? Was it real? I just wanted to know, how could Ngāti Whātua be considering such a thing given the total lack of precedent and zero commercial track record? From an included researcher perspective, one that saw me as a member of the community in genealogical terms, and which gave me access to information, and yet also recognising that I was an outsider to the actual events, I was able to delve into the records of the innovation, talk easily with the rangatira, the leaders involved, and also be one step removed from what happened. And also much of the discussions occurred several years later. So let's go back to the mid-1990s. Around that time, the hapu was in the midst of a major treaty claim. Hugh Kawharu eyeballed the government and he asked, "What do you make of this, partner?" It was a provocative challenge that sought the commitment of the government to sit down with him and other community representatives and address historical grievances relating to the loss of their lands in Tāmaki. I don't have time to talk about the claim tonight, which is a major subject in itself, but the same question was figuratively asked again of the government in relation to the railway lands. What do you make of this, partner? The government at the time wanted to get the lands off its books and sell them because they were surplus to requirements. And so the hapu was seeking, or rather demanding, that the Crown come to their party to hear their views on the railway land policy. And quite simply, Ngāti Whātua had one thing in mind: to reacquire it. Formerly fishing grounds with a fishing camp on its edges, these lands had been reclaimed and later turned into railway lands with this Grand Central station. The opportunity to once again secure title was something that the hapu could not pass up. Ngāti Whātua boldly moved into the unknown realm of Crown negotiation and commercial development. They were prepared to take very great financial and political risks, primarily on the basis that they were armed with expertise and whatever other resources that they needed to make their ambition a reality. Aside from the lack of resources to begin with, though, their position was difficult also because fundamentally it required them to test the partnership principle with the Crown. It meant thinking about an aspirational future against a background and history that had seen a total breakdown of this relationship. And in the process, from Ngāti Whātua's point of view, the history demonstrated a complete disregard by the Crown of them and the original land gift in order for the city to be built. Basically, it was about having a partnership or an agreement with the Crown, despite what the Crown had done. Contemplate that. There were some key things that enabled the hapu to advance into the unknown, to make the strange familiar, and to overcome yet further hurdles and acquire a large section of the CBD. These were, essentially, a reliance on values encompassing mana, which you can think of as being about simply strength or identity and authority, and manaki, which is about consideration of others' needs and aspirations. The second element was a kotahitanga, or unity in leadership, especially in relation to problem solving. The third element was a combination of customary leadership values underpinning 4 main leadership forms. The first was rangatiratanga, which was about the values of esteemed leaders who are risk alert. The second leadership value related to tohungatanga, or tohunga, who are specialists and who, like rangatira, are risk aware. The third related to pōtakitanga, which are the opportunity-seeking, usually younger leaders who may be risk-takers and boundary pushers. And the fourth leadership value set derives from kaumātua, or elders, who are often risk-adverse and desire to preserve customary law and tikanga. The fourth element that secured the successes in Ngāti Whātua was a strong accountability ethic to the community of descendants that lived locally and afar. And the final fifth element was their reference to history to remind them about what they had lost and what they should now fight for. So this is about the regaining of title of an ancestral estate from which they can regrow their economy, enable their hapu to prosper. These 5 elements are effectively the principal elements of a Māori kin community entrepreneurship. These values came to life from the moment when hapu leaders saw an opportunity to obtain land and begin a commercial enterprise. They continued throughout the enterprise development, including times when many obstacles were thrown in their direction and which threatened to derail the process altogether. The different leadership perspectives enabled the team to problem solve and manoeuvre around the problems, all the while keeping a focus on building a transformative future for their community. To give one example of the accountability dimension, it meant keeping the parent trust board and the wider community informed of progress, as one would expect. Accountability, however, was more than just a one-way reporting exercise. It was about being transparent about what was happening, and that also meant taking whatever questions came from the floor, your relations, asking big questions about what do you think you are doing? You are kidding. We're looking at millions of dollars. Very tricky to be accountable and stand up to your people and have an answer and find answers with them. Notably also, though, another element of accountability of the leaders to the community was started many years prior to the innovation, and it was essentially about these people proving their worth to lead. So nothing to do with the railway stuff, but they had to first prove their ability, their rights, if you like, their responsibilities to lead. For some of you, you might have heard or know about Bastion Point or Takaparafo in the 70s, and the occupation. This was a momentous time in the recent history of the hapu. A key leader was Joe Hawke, who brought together many hundreds of people to protest against the Muldoon government's proposal to acquire Takaparafo land for public housing. There was also Te Puna Tūmahai, that's Joe, a strategic member of the hapu who supported both Joe and the protesters, as well as elders along with Hugh, who were taking another pathway in talking with the government to deal with the land issues of the time. These 3 people were all leading in their own unique ways back in the 1970s, but essentially they had to prove their worth to lead. And in the process, the community was given the opportunity to accept or to reject their leadership. This was reciprocity in action, and it was a central ingredient in creating the grounds for entrepreneurship to materialise some years later. So what we're talking about is these people were developing entrepreneurship building blocks. Fast forward to the 1990s, all three came to have central roles in working together to obtain title to the railway lands. While they provided the strategic links to Ngāti Whātua, plus a mix of customary leadership styles and foci, they were also joined by what we would call tohunga or specialists. In particular, these included the financial planner Patrick Snedden, who's a district health board chair, I think, in various health functions, and the key strategist and lawyer now Judge Chris Maguire there, on the right. Left. So let's briefly and quickly trace some of the actual steps taken by what I call this dream team, Tohunga Rangatira Kaumātua Pōtiki. Around 1991, this is the cool bit, Joe saw that the government was about to dispose surplus railway land. He was quick to alert them about Ngāti Whātua's interests in it. It helped too that he had a physical presence in the railway station. If the government was going to be difficult, the theatrics of occupation were always an option. That's exactly what Joe did. You should have seen Amakura's father's eyes roll. He brought tutors and a training program into the station. He said to me, we basically took over that railway station. Others got the message very quickly. Everyone vacated. He said to me, my issue was to occupy. It also just so happened that Joe had another nifty plan up his sleeve regarding occupation. He had some mates who had some cranes who happened to cart in the largest waka in the land and have it sit right in the middle of the old station. It is said that it fitted with about an inch either side of those doors, and you can actually see how beauty gets in. Ngāti Whātua were there. The message was pretty clear. According to Joe, the 1970s Takaparawa occupation was only yesterday, and he knew full well what occupation as a strategy could achieve. Of course, so too did the government. Joe's cunning plan worked, even if there were internal rumblings within Ngāti Whātua about the strategy. That's another story. The government backed off from one idea to reutilise the land and basically not allow Ngāti Whātua to purchase it at all. At the same time as this first positioning, Joe, Hugh, Chris and Pat got together to scope out the next move and problem solve. This was a critical time because the government wanted to conclude its surplus railway land policy. But it was no small thing for Ngāti Whātua because effectively they needed millions and millions of dollars. The cost was actually more than the market value and more than any other offer on the table. But Ngāti Whātua were prepared to pay for it because of the opportunities they saw, and also, of course, the cultural and historical significance of the land, the area to them. The immediate and long-term future were completely unknown. Contemplating what the future could look like was a strange and bewildering thing to do. This is exactly what the team was doing. While finding the money was a major issue, other challenges whirled up and threatened to derail the process. One of these challenges was that the original Crown Department with whom Ngāti Whātua had originally dealt with in discussing this kaupapa had suddenly become defunct, and it was replaced by another. This new department then tried to argue that there was actually no deal. There was even the argument that the land was now worth considerably more, in fact, almost double the original agreed purchase price. The price tag was around $80 million. Ngāti Whātua was shocked at this turn of events, that the Crown could do this, that they would massively ratchet up the price and expect Ngāti Whātua to just simply accept it. Ngāti Whātua was shocked also given the history of Auckland when the hapu had originally generously offered much land to the first government in New Zealand in 1840, and yet that fact seemed to count for nothing. The issue was simply about the honour of the Crown against this long historical backdrop. And of course, Ngāti Whātua had been in this back foot situation only a few years earlier. So the big question, what to do? The team, along with Ngāti Whātua Trust Board, then started staking out their mana to the Crown as strongly as they could. This meant developing a game of tactics, political manoeuvring, and putting hard pressure on the Crown in order to seek a return to the original purchase price agreement. Reinforcing their mana also meant developing a very strong legal game plan. Times could not have been more tense, but the team were not going to lie down. Resilience in the face of adversity, working together, and again problem solving were critical. The Ngāti Whātua members could easily recall the many occasions when they had stood up against major external pressures. They didn't always come out on top, but they had developed a whakapapa reserve of precedent to battle. And so with all these resources, precedents and problem-solving tactics, by August 1996, the Crown finally relented to Ngāti Whātua pressure and agreed to sell at the non-inflated price. This was about 4 years after the original agreement. It was a massive achievement. Just as a side note, and not because I particularly want to deviate from the story so far, but there was a particular character that graced his way into Ngāti Whātua's realm of existence. This character was a businessman who was courted by a group of Māori from Te Arawa who were eyeing up the former Grand Central Station with the idea of building a casino. The thing is, they, including this businessman, had not consulted Ngāti Whātua about this in the early days of the proposal, and the hapu found themselves on a little bit of a back foot with Te Arawa and this businessman. Although the hapu was aiming at obtaining title and the casino proposal was about the use of a building on the land, no real discussions had occurred between the parties. They did try, last minute. The businessman might have had the slickness of a well-oiled publicity and business machine, where he thoughtfully remarked at the time how beautiful and fabulous the site was, but he was only interested in one thing, and that did not really entail development prospects to help Ngāti Whātua become great again. Suffice to say, the businessman left New Zealand and the casino bid was won by Sky City, a little bit up the road. While political and strategic issues took up the bulk of the time to just get an agreement to purchase, there was still the major issue of actually securing a huge amount of money, 40 million. A business partner was needed, and they also needed bank support. A major question was, who would be interested in partnering with a little Māori group who had no track record in business, let alone in major commercial land or property development specifically? There were, in fact, many eager punters, or tire kickers, as Chris described them, but none had the credibility or the commitment to follow through. One option canvassed involved partnering with a Hong Kong developer. The chair of the Ngāti Whātua board at the time, respected elder Ruby Gray, said, "If we can get the land back, I'm prepared to wait 100 years. What she meant was the idea of allowing the Hong Kong group to have the land for very little money for 100 years was okay, because the land would be secured by their development presence. Although the Hong Kong proposal fell through, it enabled Ngāti Whātua to do some more fine-tuning of the ideas. 100 years was a very, very long time with no income or very, very little income from the land. Obtaining economic value from the land within the current lifetime became a central issue, and so the next step then became one of focusing on this very issue. I don't have time to go into details, but what I can say is that Ngāti Whātua found a joint venture partner who were able to provide the money to improve the land, subdivide it, and prepare the blocks for leasehold sale. And so now, because the hapu had a major JV partner who took the major financial risks as the major leaseholder who would then set out to sublease, Ngāti Whātua were able to miraculously obtain title to the land. Another option vigorously discussed by Ngāti Whātua leaders at the time was in fact to lodge a claim with the Waitangi Tribunal in order to get the land back. It's ours, just give it back. As Hugh remarked in the Herald, however, despite our confidence in the legitimacy of our claim, we have reached a point where arguing with the Crown for another 20 years made the solution with Magellan, the JV partner, economically sensible. In other words, taking a treaty claim was deemed too risky. I thought you might find that kind of interesting, because you hear a lot about Māori claimant groups making claims all the time through the tribunal or the Office of Treaty Settlements. Of course, nothing in major commercial property development is straightforward, even with a JV partner, and considerable concerns remained because leasehold buying was very slow. The apartment market was slowing and retail space was seen as having to compete with the then burgeoning shopping malls popping up throughout the suburbs. David Jones signed up to be an anchor tenant but then pulled out Lee McDowell in 97. And then the Herald was all over this stuff, saying, one comment was, questions inevitably arise as to how fast projects may proceed and whether the sheer scale of the area available may require seductive deals to incite interest. The future could not be more strange and worrying. One of the key strategies to attract investors was, as mentioned, the preparation of the land for sale by overseeing the building of roads, street lighting, pavements and other landscaping. After considerable discussion and further problem solving by the team, another major incentive or seductive deal offer, as the Herald put it, in order to attract investors was decided upon. Basically, Ngāti Whātua agreed that they would offer leasehold sections for 15 years, rent-free. Despite this extremely difficult first phase, a crucial fact was nevertheless the reality. Ngāti Whātua now had title to a significant land area, and it comprises a very large chunk of the CBD, equivalent to around 40 football fields. All the leaseholds were eventually bought, and don't you love that? The Maoris pay 40 million for city. And the writers, Ruben Wharewhara, a Māori writer, but Māoris, this is just the other day. You wouldn't even dream of seeing such headlines in a newspaper. And so these are just some images of the railway land and what's there now, as you would know, for those who've been up there. Grand Central Station in the back there. Hugh and Te Puna both explain a strategic weapon or resource was the Trust Board's lawyer, Chris Maguire. He was far more than a lawyer, as Vince would prove. As a kind of tohunga or expert in negotiation, in tactics and in law, he was centrally involved in the negotiations and where necessary made vigorous representations to business, local or central government officials as a key member of the team. He proposed pathways, ideas and tactics, tested them out with our father, and he initiated it and led discussions with Magellan, the JV partner. He also provided protection to Ngāti Whātua by sounding out then dealing with the opportunists who were eager to enter into some kind of partnership with Ngāti Whātua to make a few bucks, but with little regard for anything else. Patrick Snedden was also a modern-day tohunga who, despite not being of the hapu in descent terms, was bound to the hapu in kinship terms, and whose financial and business expertise would be critical. Together, these tactical skills were key strategic resources, combined with the leadership resources of Hugh, Joe, and Te Puna in entirely new ways that had not been seen before in the community. The leadership values celebrated a kotahitanga of difference. Embedded within that was a commonality of purpose, the value of manaaki, which included the team's trust and respect of each other, cooperation, patience, and a focus on problem solving. I could give you a bit more of a background, but to have these four individuals, very, very strong three individuals in Ngāti Whātua come together against that history of the 1970s, you would never imagine it. But they in the end came to realise that they each came from different leadership perspectives in the way they understand risk and management. And so that enabled those strengths of each of those individuals to be really played out and work together, a kotahitanga of difference. The historical guides of the 1950s and 70s and the colonial period before that acted as reference points to the hapui leaders. They described leadership actions that were carried out, the people dimension, and they described resources that were important, the land dimension. Both of these things help to contextualise the railway venture within this whakapapa, or genealogy of Ngāti Whātua affairs. At the time when Hapu was contemplating buying surplus government-owned railway land for $40 million, my father wryly commented at the time that the tribe didn't have 40 cents, let alone $40 million. And yet here we are. Here we are seen now in the $700+ million asset base built in large part from this railway lands innovation and these people coming together. Not bad for a small hapu who had a strong sense of history, strong resilience, a big waka, and a combination of strategic, customary leadership values and approaches. Making the strange familiar or normal, where the strange was the world of business, finance, commercial, land development, was what Ngāti Whātua did. There is much, I think, that we can learn from their journey. So that was the story, and if there's one last thing to say in relation to making a strange but familiar idea, it is that Māori research professors are a strange but somewhat familiar breed of academic. But they should be familiar and not a strange breed of academic. My last comments, therefore, are to the next generation of Māori scholars. I look forward to seeing you here, this side, telling us about your kōrero, your research journeys as Māori research professors. Kia ora mai tātou. That's right, I'm reminded.
He aha te hau, he aha te hau, e wawara mai, he tiu he rā ki nāna, ia mai te pūpū taraki hiki uta e te ki nā, tu e au, te kotu. Wia te pau whakairo katu, ki wai te mata, i oku wairangi e kōkiri.
Yeah. Tukua mai te aroha. Aura ki tū nā rato, ka kea nā rangi tū ha. Whakako te mutsu o te manu, kei kea nā rara. Kia ora Merata, tō kōrero.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Tony Ballantyne, and I'm the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Humanities here at the University, and it's with great pleasure that I will deliver a vote of thanks to Professor Kawharu. Her excellent lecture has been an opportunity to share with us a powerful story, an account of some of the key passages in the recent history of Ngāti Whātua. The story is one of transformation, a process of rendering the strange familiar. It is the story of Ngāti Whātua hapu seizing an opportunity and remaking their world, and in that process also enacting significant change, significant transformation within our largest city. And how apt it is that railways and railway land was central to that story. I'm a colonial historian, so we think a lot about railway infrastructure and its centrality in the colonisation of our lands. Railways, of course, were long celebrated as the engine for colonial progress, propelling the advance of civilisation. But they were the powerful instruments of colonisation, the wooden and iron infrastructure that enabled the colonial state to move troops around and to reach into the interior of these motu to extend the power of the colonial government and the reach of colonial capitalism. So there is a wonderful irony that the occupation and reacquisition of railway land after this very protracted struggle, in which Ngāti Whātua leaders exhibited great tenacity, resourcefulness, intelligence, and patience. So it's tremendous that it was railway land, I think, incredibly symbolic, that propelled the ability of Ngāti Whātua to envisage a new future and to realise it. At the outset, I think Merata mentioned her research kete. It's a very capacious kete, I think. And you shared just one story, but it's an incredibly rich story, I think, Merata. And it returned to some of the key and recurring concerns that run through your writing and your work: leadership, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And I think her talk, like her research, has had people at its centre. And it has underlined an incredibly rich tradition of Māori academic work and a potent tradition of political leadership. She noted that her research has been focused on the positive, pushing away from a deficit framing to think about solutions, to think about new models of organisation, new ways of thinking and doing. But at the same time, she has highlighted the immense resources that come from an appreciation of history, from the weight of tradition, from the cultivation of leadership, and from a holding on to identity and to a sense of belonging in the face of great injustice and inequality. So, Professor Kawharu, we have come together to listen to you, to hear your thoughts, and we've greatly enjoyed your lecture, and I think it's given a lot for us to think about. But it has been a fantastic opportunity to come together collectively to join in the celebration of your promotion. So I'd invite you in a moment to join with me in congratulating Merata. I have a gift to present to her, which Lisa kindly arranged earlier. And I would encourage you all to join us in the staff club for some refreshments and to further celebrate this great occasion. So, kia ora tātou.